The great crystal dome of Zephyria Prime sparkled with 1,000 colors as beings from across the galaxy gathered for the most important meeting in 1,000 years. The Galactic Council only met once every millennium, and this time something was different. For the first time in the Council's long history, humans had been invited to attend. Sarah Chen walked slowly through the massive halls, her simple black uniform standing out among the exotic forms around her. Tall blue-skinned draconians towered over everyone with their sharp teeth and glowing red eyes. The Nexari looked like living crystals that caught and reflected light in beautiful patterns. Floating above them all were the ethereals, beings made of pure energy that spoke through crystal boxes attached to their glowing forms. The human delegation was small compared to the others, just 5 people sitting at a tiny table near the back of the enormous chamber. Other species had brought hundreds of representatives, advisors, and guards. The humans had come with just their basic equipment and simple translation devices. As Sarah took her seat, she could hear the whispers and comments from the other delegates. The Draconians were laughing about something, their deep voices carrying across the room. The Nexari made musical sounds that their translators turned into words about primitive newcomers. Even the normally quiet Vorthak, with their large purple heads and telepathic abilities, were sending thoughts to each other that made them shake with what looked like amusement. High Counselor Zexthul of the Draconian Hegemony stood up to begin the session. His massive form cast a shadow over the entire assembly. His voice boomed through the chamber as he spoke about trade routes, territorial boundaries, and mining rights. For hours, the various species discussed their business while the humans listened quietly. Finally, Sarah stood up and asked for permission to speak. The chamber fell silent for a moment before breaking into laughter. Zexthul looked down at her with what might have been amusement. "The human wishes to speak," he announced, his voice dripping with condescension. "Very well. What does the youngest species in our galaxy wish to say?" Sarah cleared her throat and spoke calmly into her translator. "The human government requests permission to explore the uncharted sectors beyond the rim worlds. We believe there may be valuable scientific discoveries to be made in those regions." The laughter that followed was even louder than before. Delegates from dozens of species began talking at once. The ethereal's crystal translators buzzed with what sounded like electronic chuckling. Even the normally serious Epoch watchers seemed to find the request amusing. Zexthul raised his hand for silence. "My dear humans," he began, his tone like someone talking to children, "you have only achieved faster-than-light travel within the last century. Most of the species here have been exploring space for millions of years. The sectors beyond the rim worlds contain dangers that would destroy your primitive vessels before you could send a distress signal." A Nexari representative stood up, her crystalline form catching the light. "The humans lack even basic psychic abilities," she said, her musical voice translated into words. "They have no advanced biotechnology, no dimensional manipulation capabilities. They are barely more advanced than the species we first encountered when we began space travel 10 million years ago." More laughter filled the chamber. Sarah noticed that some of the delegates were openly pointing at the human table now. One of the Vorthak sent a telepathic message that made several nearby species burst into new fits of laughter. "Furthermore," continued Zexthul, "your species has shown a disturbing tendency toward violence and self-destruction. Your own history is filled with wars and conflicts. How can we trust such an unstable species to explore dangerous regions of space without causing problems for the rest of us?" An ethereal's crystal translator spoke up. "Perhaps it would be better if the humans focused on developing their own solar system for the next few thousand years. Once they have proven they can maintain peace among themselves and develop more advanced technology, we can revisit this request." The vote was swift and unanimous. Every single species voted to restrict human exploration to their current solar systems. The official reason given was safety concerns for a fragile young species. But Sarah could see the real reason in their expressions. They simply did not believe humans were capable of anything important. As the session moved on to other business, Sarah felt the weight of the humiliation. Representatives from other species occasionally glanced at the human table and whispered to each other. She caught fragments of translated conversations about upstart primitives, and how long will they last, and someone should have told them this was a meeting for real civilizations. When the session finally ended, Sarah and her team gathered their simple equipment and prepared to leave. As they walked through the halls, other delegates continued their conversations about human limitations. The Draconians were discussing betting pools on how long humanity would survive in the galactic community. The Nexari were analyzing human technology and finding it quaint but useless. The Ethereals debated whether humans even qualified as a truly sentient species. Back, in her quarters on the human transport ship, Sarah sat alone for a moment. The weight of representing her entire species had been heavy enough before the meeting. Now it felt crushing. Every human alive was counting on this mission to open new possibilities for exploration and growth. Instead, they had been laughed at and dismissed like children asking to play with adult tools. But Sarah was not just a diplomat. She was also a former military officer who had served in the Deep Space Research Division before taking this assignment. She knew things about human capabilities that these alien species did not, things that would surprise them greatly if they ever found out. She activated her quantum-encrypted communicator and sent a message to a secure facility hidden deep in the Kuiper Belt beyond Pluto. The message was simple, just 3 words that would change everything. Protocol 7 authorized. The response came back immediately. Understood. Initiating dimensional breach procedures. Captain Vasquez sends her regards. Sarah smiled for the first time since the meeting began. The aliens thought they knew what humans were capable of. They had looked at humanity's public technology, their obvious military capabilities, and their short history of spaceflight. They had made their judgments based on what they could see and measure. What they did not know was that humans had been working on projects that these ancient species could not even imagine. While other civilizations focused on building bigger ships and more powerful weapons, humanity had been exploring something far more interesting: the spaces between dimensions. Sarah looked out her window at the stars and thought about what was coming. The Galactic Council had made their decision based on incomplete information. They would soon learn that there were things about humans that no scanning technology could detect, and no amount of observation could reveal. In a few months, when the dimensional barriers began to weaken and reality itself started to bend, these proud ancient civilizations would finally understand that they had severely underestimated the primitive species from Earth. The laughter would stop, and the real conversation would begin. Until then, Sarah would play her part as the disappointed diplomat from a backward world. It would make the revelation so much more satisfying when it came. 3 months after the humiliating council meeting, Commander Vextar of the Draconian Deep Space Patrol was having a very bad day. His sensors were showing impossible readings and his crew was starting to panic. Space itself seemed to be bending and twisting in ways that violated every law of physics he had learned in his 200 years of service. "Sir, the gravitational readings are off the charts," reported his science officer, her claws clicking nervously on her control panel. "It's like space-time is folding in on itself." Vextar stared at the main display screen, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. The stars in front of his ship were stretching and bending like reflections in disturbed water. His navigation computer kept giving error messages because it could not figure out where they were anymore. "Run a full diagnostic on all sensors," he ordered. "This has to be equipment failure." But the diagnostics came back clean. Every instrument was working perfectly, which meant the impossible readings were real. Space itself was changing around them. Similar reports were coming in from across the galaxy. On the crystal world of Nexus Prime, the greatest scientists of the Nexari civilization were staring at their instruments in confusion. Their most advanced computers, machines that could calculate the movement of entire star systems, were unable to process what they were detecting. "The dimensional fabric is fluctuating," announced lead scientist Harmony, her crystalline body flickering with agitated colors. "These readings suggest that the barriers between different layers of reality are becoming unstable." Her assistants gathered around the main analysis chamber, where holographic displays showed wave patterns unlike anything in their million-year database. The Nexari had been studying space and time longer than most species had existed, but these phenomena were completely new to them. High above the galactic plane, in a space station that existed partially outside normal reality, the Ethereals were experiencing something they had never felt before: confusion. As beings of pure energy who existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, they were usually aware of disturbances in space-time long before other species noticed anything. But these changes were different. They seemed to be coming from directions that the Ethereals did not know existed. Through their crystal communicators, they sent urgent messages to each other. The disturbances originate from dimensional levels beyond our perception, one ethereal reported. We are detecting manipulations of space-time from what appears to be the seventh dimensional layer. This announcement caused something like shock among the energy beings. They had always believed that only 3 or 4 dimensional layers existed. The idea that there might be 7 layers, with the highest ones containing forces they could not even detect, was deeply disturbing. On Chronos 7, home to the time-sensitive Epoch Watchers, ancient beings who could see possible futures were experiencing their own crisis. Their temporal observatory, a massive structure that monitored the flow of time itself, was showing readings that made no sense. Elder timekeeper Kronak stood before the great viewing screen, his ancient form trembling with concern. "The time streams are becoming tangled," he announced to his fellow watchers. "Something is manipulating not just space, but time itself from dimensions we cannot reach." The Epoch Watchers had been observing the galaxy for millions of years, watching the rise and fall of civilizations, predicting changes in the cosmic order. They had archives that recorded every significant event in galactic history. But nothing in their vast knowledge prepared them for what they were seeing now. "The barriers between dimensional realms are weakening," Kronax continued. "If this continues, realities that should never touch might begin to overlap. The consequences could be catastrophic for all known life." Emergency sessions were called across the galaxy. Species that rarely spoke to each other were suddenly sharing information and resources. The Draconians put aside their territorial expansion plans to focus on understanding the phenomenon. The Nexari opened their most secret research facilities to other species. Even the mysterious Shadow Collective, beings who lived in the dark spaces between stars, emerged to offer their knowledge. But none of them had answers. Their most advanced science could not explain what was happening. Their most powerful computers could not predict where it would lead. For the first time in their long histories, the great civilizations of the galaxy felt truly helpless. The disturbances grew stronger with each passing day. Entire star systems reported gravitational anomalies that made space travel dangerous. Trade routes that had been stable for thousands of years became unreliable as the very nature of space changed around them. On military vessels throughout the galaxy, weapon systems began malfunctioning in strange ways. Energy beams would fire normally but then curve in impossible directions, as if space itself was bending the attacks away from their targets. Some weapons simply disappeared entirely, as if they had been fired into dimensions that did not exist. The panic really began when long-range sensors near the galactic core detected something that should have been impossible. Deep space monitoring stations reported a massive gravitational anomaly that was growing larger by the hour. But this was not a natural phenomenon like a black hole or neutron star. "The signatures were all wrong. It's artificial," reported the head of Galactic Survey Command in an emergency broadcast. "Whatever is causing the disturbance, it was created by intelligence. But the technology involved is beyond anything we have ever encountered." As the news spread, representatives from major civilizations began contacting each other frantically. If some unknown force was manipulating dimensions on this scale, it represented a threat unlike anything they had faced before. Weapons and defenses that had protected them for millennia might be useless. Against enemies who could attack from dimensions, they could not even detect their situation reached a critical point when the Deep Space Station Omega-7, positioned at the edge of known space, sent its final transmission. The message was brief and terrifying. "Something massive is emerging from the anomaly. It's phasing in and out of visible reality. We can see it, but our sensors say it's not there. It's bigger than anything we've ever..." Signal lost. Contact with Omega-7 was never re-established. When rescue ships arrived at its location 3 days later, they found empty space. The station was gone, but there was no debris, no signs of destruction. It was as if the entire facility had simply stepped sideways out of reality. The emergency council meeting was called for the next day, with representatives from every major civilization participating. As they gathered once again on Zephyria Prime, the mood was very different from the last meeting. The laughter and casual conversation were replaced by worried discussions and fearful glances. High Counselor Zex Thul looked around the chamber at faces filled with concern and uncertainty. "We face an unknown threat that possesses technology beyond our understanding," he announced. Whatever intelligence is behind these phenomena, it has capabilities that make our most advanced science look primitive. It was then that the message came through on all communication channels simultaneously. The voice was calm, professional, and speaking in perfect galactic standard. "This is Captain Maria Vasquez of the Earth Deep Space Research Division. We are requesting an immediate audience with the Galactic Council." The chamber fell completely silent. Every being in the room turned to look at the small human delegation, who seemed just as surprised as everyone else. The implications hit them all at the same moment. The impossible dimensional manipulations, the technology beyond their understanding, the mysterious force that could make space stations disappear. It was all connected to the species they had laughed at just 3 months earlier. The vessel that emerged from the dimensional rift defied everything the galaxy's greatest minds thought they knew about physics and engineering. Captain Vasquez's ship was not just large, it was impossible. The hull seemed to be made from crystallized space-time itself, surfaces that reflected light from dimensions that should not exist. The ship appeared solid one moment, then became transparent the next, as if it could not decide which layer of reality it wanted to exist in. Sensors throughout the galactic fleet tried desperately to analyze the approaching vessel, but their readings made no sense. The ship registered as being simultaneously 10 kilometers long and infinite in size. Mass detectors showed it weighing nothing at all, while gravitational sensors indicated it had the mass of a small moon. Some instruments claimed the ship was not there at all, while others detected technology so advanced it might as well have been magic. Admiral Corvin of the Nexari Deep Space Command stared at his displays in complete confusion. "The vessel is phasing through our defensive barriers as if they were made of light," he reported to the Emergency Council. "Our most powerful force fields have no effect on it whatsoever." The ship's ability to pass through solid matter was perhaps the most disturbing aspect of its impossible nature. When the Draconian Defense Fleet moved to intercept, their massive battleships found themselves trying to target something that could become intangible at will. Weapons fire passed harmlessly through the vessel whenever it chose to shift its dimensional phase. But it was not just the ship's defensive capabilities that shocked the assembled civilizations. The technology displayed by the vessel suggested an understanding of reality that went far beyond anything they had achieved. Energy readings showed that the ship was drawing power from sources that existed in higher dimensional layers. Its propulsion system seemed to work by convincing space-time that the vessel was already where it wanted to be. High Counselor Zexthal watched the impossible ship approach through the main viewing port of the council chambers. His pride as a member of one of the galaxy's oldest and most advanced civilizations was crumbling as he realized that everything he believed about technological development was wrong. "How is this possible?" he asked the assembled scientists and military leaders. 3 months ago, we determined that humans had barely achieved basic spaceflight. Now they possess technology that surpasses our most advanced theories. The answer came from an unexpected source. Elder Timekeeper Kronax of the Epoch Watchers had been silent during most of the emergency session, but now his ancient voice carried across the chamber. "We have been observing the wrong layer of reality," he said slowly. "While we focused on what humans were doing in normal space-time, they were developing their true capabilities in dimensions we did not know existed." The implications of this statement sent waves of shock through the assembled delegates. If humans had been working in higher dimensional layers, then everything the galaxy's civilizations knew about them was based on incomplete information. They had been judging human capabilities by looking at only the most basic level of their activities. Captain Vasquez's voice came through the communication systems again, calm and professional despite the chaos her ship's arrival had caused. "We are maintaining position at the edge of your system. We request permission to address the Galactic Council as representatives of humanity." The request sparked intense debate among the assembled species. Some argued that any civilization capable of such impossible technology should be treated with extreme caution. Others wanted to immediately surrender and beg for mercy before the humans decided they were a threat. A few suggested trying to destroy the vessel before it could do whatever it had come to do. But the ethereals, with their ability to perceive multiple dimensions simultaneously, provided the most disturbing information of all. Through their crystal translators, they shared what they could sense about the mysterious ship. "The vessel exists primarily in the 7th dimensional layer," they reported. What we see in our reality is merely a small projection of its true form. The majority of the ship's structure exists in spaces where our technology cannot reach or even detect. This revelation changed everything. If the ship they were looking at was just a tiny fragment of the vessel's true size, then humanity possessed capabilities that made every other civilization look like primitive tribes playing with sticks and stones. The emergency vote was swift, but not unanimous. Despite some opposition, the Council agreed to allow Captain Vasquez to address them directly. What choice did they have? If humans could manipulate dimensions beyond their understanding, traditional diplomatic protocols seemed pointless. The chamber fell completely silent as a shimmering portal opened in the center of the room. Through it stepped a woman in a simple uniform that looked almost identical to what Ambassador Chen had worn 3 months earlier. But Captain Vasquez carried herself differently. Where Chen had seemed humble and deferential, Vasquez projected quiet confidence and authority. "Members of the Galactic Council," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the vast chamber without any technological assistance. "I am Captain Maria Vasquez of the Earth Deep Space Research Division. I come bearing a message from humanity." High Counselor Zexthul found his voice first, though it trembled with uncertainty. "Captain Vasquez, your arrival has raised many questions. How long has humanity possessed such advanced technology?" Vasquez smiled slightly, an expression that somehow made every being in the room feel very young and very foolish. "Counselor Zexthul, humanity has been exploring dimensional layers beyond your perception for over 50 years. While you were focused on conquering space through brute force and traditional physics, we were learning to work with the fundamental structures of reality itself." The Nexari representative, her crystalline form flickering with confused colors, asked the question that everyone was thinking. "But your technology in normal spacetime is so primitive. Your ships, your weapons, your industrial capabilities, they all suggest a barely spacefaring civilization." "That is correct," Vasquez acknowledged. "We deliberately kept our three-dimensional technology at basic levels. There was no need to develop massive fleets or planet-destroying weapons when we could achieve far better results by working in higher dimensional layers." And Ethereal's crystal translator buzzed with what might have been distress. "You have been deceiving us about your true capabilities." "Not deceiving," Vasquez corrected gently. "Simply allowing you to draw your own conclusions based on incomplete observations. When you encounter a species for the first time, do you immediately reveal all your capabilities to them, or do you watch and learn while they show you who they really are?" The uncomfortable silence that followed this question told Vasquez everything. She needed to know about how these civilizations typically dealt with less advanced species. "The dimensional disturbances you have been experiencing," Vasquez continued, "are the result of our ships moving between layers of reality. We apologize for any inconvenience, but it was necessary to demonstrate that humanity's capabilities extend far beyond what you observed during our first diplomatic contact." Elder Timekeeper Kronax leaned forward, his ancient eyes focused intently on the human captain. "How many dimensional layers can your people access?" Vasquez paused as if considering how much information to share. "Currently, our ships can operate effectively in the first 7 layers of reality. Our research teams are working on accessing the 8th and 9th layers, but those realms require different approaches to consciousness and physics." The chamber erupted in shocked conversations. 7-dimensional layers. Most of the galaxy's civilizations could barely detect the existence of a 4th layer. And here was this primitive species claiming to operate in 7 different levels of reality. "This changes everything," whispered a representative from the Shadow Collective. "If humans can manipulate reality from the 7th layer, then every assumption we have made about galactic power structures is wrong." Vasquez nodded gravely. "That is exactly why I am here, Counselor. Humanity requests a new diplomatic arrangement, one based on accurate information about all our capabilities. We believe it is time for honest conversation about what each of our species can actually contribute to galactic civilization." High Counselor Zexthul realized that the laughter and mockery from 3 months earlier now seemed like the behavior of children who had stumbled into an adult conversation. The primitive humans had been watching, learning, and developing capabilities that made his own ancient civilization look like newcomers to space. The question now was what humanity intended to do with power that dwarfed everything the galaxy had ever seen. Captain Vasquez walked slowly around the holographic projector in the center of the council chamber, her calm demeanor a stark contrast to the tension radiating from every alien representative. The truth she was about to reveal would reshape everything. These ancient civilizations thought they knew about the universe and their place in it. Before I explain humanity's true capabilities, she began, I need you to understand something fundamental about consciousness and reality. Most species develop their technology by trying to dominate the physical universe through brute force. Bigger ships, more powerful weapons, faster computers. But humans took a different path entirely. A three-dimensional image appeared above the projector, showing the familiar structure of an atom. But as the delegates watched, the image expanded to reveal layers of reality extending beyond normal space-time like nested shells around the atomic core. While your civilizations were perfecting matter manipulation and energy control, Vasquez continued, human scientists were studying the relationship between consciousness and the fundamental structure of reality. We discovered that thought itself can serve as a bridge between dimensional layers. High Counselor Zexthol leaned forward, his massive form casting shadows across the chamber. You are claiming that consciousness can directly affect physical reality? Not just affect it, Vasquez replied. In the higher dimensional layers, consciousness becomes a fundamental force, just like gravity or electromagnetism in your familiar three-dimensional space. Human neural patterns, it turns out, have a unique resonance with these higher dimensional frequencies. The hologram changed to show brain scans of human subjects, their neural patterns creating complex waveforms that seem to extend beyond the physical boundaries of their skulls. The Vorthak representatives, with their powerful telepathic abilities, leaned closer to examine the data. This is impossible, one of them transmitted. We have studied consciousness for millions of years. Human minds show no unusual psychic abilities. Vasquez smiled. That is because you were looking for the wrong type of mental activity. You were searching for telepathy, telekinesis, and energy manipulation. But human consciousness operates on a completely different principle. Instead of trying to force our will upon reality, we learn to harmonize with the deeper structures that create reality in the first place. The image shifted again, showing a human ship moving through what looked like crystallized thought patterns rather than normal space. The vessel seemed to be swimming through an ocean of pure possibility, its hull adapting and changing as it encountered different streams of existence. The seventh dimensional layer, Vasquez explained, is not just another level of space-time. It is the realm where intention becomes physics, where will becomes engineering. In that layer of reality, our ships are not built from metal and energy. They are grown from crystallized possibility, shaped by human consciousness working in harmony with the fundamental forces of creation. Elder Timekeeper Kronax of the Epic Watchers spoke in a voice filled with awe and terror. You are describing technology based on manipulating the very foundations of existence itself. Exactly, Vasquez confirmed. And that is only the beginning. While your civilizations were expanding through normal space-time, human exploration teams were establishing research stations in dimensions where time flows differently, where cause and effect follow rules that would seem like magic to those limited to three-dimensional thinking. She gestured, and the hologram showed vast structures that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. These were clearly artificial constructs, but they defied every conventional understanding of engineering and architecture. These are our deep exploration facilities, Vasquez said. They exist in the 9th and 10th dimensional layers, where we have made contact with forms of intelligence so advanced that they exist as pure mathematics. These entities have been teaching us about levels of reality that make the 7th dimension look simple by comparison. The revelation hit the assembled delegates like a physical blow. They had been worried about humanity's 7th dimensional capabilities, but humans were already working with 10th dimensional intelligence that operated as living equations. A Nixari scientist's crystalline form flickered rapidly with agitation. How long have you been in contact with these mathematical entities? Approximately 30 years, Vasquez replied casually. They are fascinating beings. They experience existence as a series of elegant proofs and theorems. They have shown us that what you consider to be physical laws are actually just local preferences in the cosmic equation. Reality is far more flexible than any of your scientists imagined. The ethereals, beings of pure energy, who had considered themselves among the most advanced intelligences in the galaxy, were broadcasting distress signals through their crystal translators. "We exist partially outside normal spacetime," one of them said. "Yet we can barely perceive the fourth-dimensional layer. How do humans access realms we cannot even detect?" Vasquez turned to address the energy beings directly. "Your existence as pure energy is actually what limits your dimensional perception. You are still thinking in terms of matter and energy, just organized differently. Human consciousness operates on principles that transcend both matter and energy. We work with the patterns that create what you experience as reality." The implications of this statement sent waves of shock through the chamber. If humans could manipulate the underlying structures that created physical laws themselves, then every weapon, every defense, every technology possessed by the galaxy's civilizations was essentially meaningless. "But surely there are limits to these abilities," protested a representative from the Shadow Collective. "No species can possess unlimited power." Vasquez nodded thoughtfully. "You are correct. There are limits. Working in the higher dimensional layers requires tremendous mental discipline and cooperation. A single human cannot manipulate 10th dimensional mathematics any more than a single draconian can build a starship. But humanity has learned to work together in ways that allow our collective consciousness to interface directly with reality's source code." She paused, looking around the chamber at faces filled with confusion, fear, and dawning understanding. "Which brings me to the real reason I am here today. For the past 50 years, while you were conducting your territorial disputes and resource wars, humanity has been observing galactic civilization from the higher dimensional layers." The chamber fell completely silent. The implications of this statement were staggering. "From the 7th dimensional layer and above," Vasquez continued, "the activities of three-dimensional civilizations are completely transparent. Your encrypted communications appear as simple light patterns. Your military strategies are as easy to read as children's picture books. Your secret treaties, hidden bases, and classified technologies might as well be displayed on public billboards." High Counselor Zexthol's voice was barely a whisper. "Everything? You have seen everything? The Draconian hegemony's plans to absorb the Outer Rim territories, the Nexari manipulation of galactic trade routes, the Shadow Collective's network of espionage agents, the Ethereal's experiments with consciousness transfer, even the Vortex attempts to create a telepathic hive mind spanning multiple species." Vasquez's voice remained calm and professional as she listed secrets that each civilization thought were perfectly hidden. "We have observed it all from dimensions where your security measures have no meaning, and we have concluded that your approach to galactic civilization is fundamentally limited by your focus on three-dimensional competition for finite resources." The revelation that humanity had been watching everything from realms beyond detection meant that every major civilization's strategic plans were worthless. Decades or centuries of careful preparation were now revealed to be based on information that was never actually secret, but perhaps most disturbing of all was the implication that humans had possessed this incredible surveillance capability for decades and had chosen to remain silent, watching and learning while the galaxy's great powers played their games of expansion and dominance. The question that hung in the air, unspoken but understood by everyone in the chamber, was what humanity intended to do with all this knowledge and power. The silence in the council chamber stretched for long minutes as the assembled representatives tried to process the magnitude of what they had learned. Captain Vasquez stood calmly in the center of the room, waiting for someone to find their voice. Finally, High Counselor Zexthol managed to speak, though his usually commanding tone was reduced to barely a whisper. "What do you want from us?" he asked, the question carrying the weight of an entire galaxy's worth of civilization suddenly realizing they were no longer the dominant powers they had believed themselves to be. Vasquez smiled, and for the first time since her arrival, her expression showed genuine warmth instead of professional courtesy. "We want to offer you something that has never existed in galactic history. True partnership and exploration of infinite possibility." She gestured, and the holographic projector displayed an image that took everyone's breath away. It showed layer upon layer of dimensional reality stretching away beyond the familiar 3 dimensions, each level containing structures and life forms that challenged every assumption about what existence could be. "What you call the universe," Vasquez explained, "is actually just the smallest, most basic layer of something incomprehensibly vast. Beyond the 7th dimension, Intelligence takes forms that make our discussion of matter and energy seem like children arguing about which color of sand makes the best castle. The image zoomed deeper into the higher layers, revealing civilizations that existed as living music, entities that communicated through mathematical poetry, and structures built from crystallized time that spanned distances measured in concepts rather than miles. In the 15th dimensional layer, Vasquez continued, we have encountered a civilization that experiences existence as a single, ongoing symphony. Each individual consciousness is a note in a composition that has been playing for billions of years. They build their cities by composing new harmonies that crystallize into architecture made from pure sound. A Vorthak representative, his telepathic abilities, straining to comprehend what he was hearing, managed to ask, how many dimensional layers exist? We do not know, Vasquez admitted. Human exploration teams have confirmed the existence of at least 37 distinct layers, but the mathematical entities we work with suggest that the actual number may be infinite. Each layer operates according to different rules, contains different forms of life, and offers different possibilities for growth and development. The implications hit the assembled delegates in waves. Their territorial disputes over planets and star systems suddenly seemed absurdly small when infinite layers of reality waited to be explored. The resources they had been fighting over for millennia were meaningless when higher dimensional civilizations had learned to create matter and energy from pure thought. Elder Timekeeper. Cronax leaned heavily on his staff, his ancient eyes wide with wonder and terror. Our entire understanding of existence is wrong, he said slowly. Everything we have built, everything we have achieved is insignificant compared to what lies beyond our perception. Not insignificant, Vasquez corrected gently. Simply limited. Every civilization must start somewhere, and your achievements in three-dimensional space-time are remarkable. The draconian mastery of energy manipulation, the Nexari understanding of crystalline mathematics, the ethereal's transition beyond matter, these are all impressive accomplishments. She paused, looking around the chamber at representatives who were struggling to maintain their composure in the face of revelations that shattered their entire worldview. But imagine what you could achieve if you were not limited to competing for resources in a single layer of reality. Imagine the discoveries waiting in dimensions where your unique abilities could be developed beyond anything you have dreamed possible. The transformation in the chamber was remarkable to watch. Civilizations that had been planning military expansion just hours earlier were suddenly faced with the possibility of exploration that made their wildest dreams of conquest seem petty and meaningless. A Nexari scientist was the first to grasp the full implications. You are offering to teach us dimensional navigation, she said, her crystalline form now flickering with excited colors instead of fear. We are offering to include you in humanity's exploration programs, Vasquez confirmed, but this requires a fundamental change in how galactic civilization operates. The old model of territorial competition and resource hoarding becomes meaningless when infinite resources exist across infinite dimensional layers. High Counselor Zex Thol found his voice again, though it was filled with a humility that would have been impossible just hours earlier. What would you require of us? First, an end to military expansion and territorial conflicts, Vasquez replied. These activities are not just wasteful, they are dangerous when conducted by species that lack dimensional awareness. Weapons designed for three-dimensional warfare can cause unpredictable effects when they interact with higher dimensional phenomena. The assembled delegates thought about the recent reports of weapon systems malfunctioning in strange ways, and suddenly understood why their military technology had been failing. Second, Vasquez continued, a commitment to cooperative exploration rather than competitive expansion. The higher dimensional layers contain intelligences and forces that make our entire galaxy look like a single grain of sand. Approaching these realms requires humility, wisdom, and the combined knowledge of all our civilizations. An ethereal's crystal translator buzzed with what might have been hope. You would share your dimensional navigation technology with us? More than that, Vasquez said. We would invite your people to join human crews on exploration missions to the higher layers. Ethereal consciousness could be invaluable in dimensions where thought and energy blend together. Vorthak telepathy might allow communication with hive mind civilizations in the 12th dimensional layer. Nexari crystalline mathematics could help us understand structures in the 20th layer that exist as living geometric equations. The vision she was painting was breathtaking. Instead of ancient civilizations slowly declining as they exhausted the resources of their territories, she was offering unlimited growth and development across infinite realms of possibility. But not everyone was ready to accept this new paradigm. A faction of military leaders from various species attempted to object, clinging to traditional concepts of power and dominance. Their resistance ended quickly when Vasquez demonstrated the defensive capabilities of seventh-dimensional technology. With a simple gesture, she caused the entire Draconian battle fleet stationed outside the system to shift slightly out of phase with normal space-time. For 10 minutes, the most powerful military force in the galaxy found their weapons firing harmlessly through empty space, while their targets remained clearly visible but completely untouchable. Violence becomes meaningless, Vasquez explained as the fleet was returned to normal space, when your opponents can step sideways out of the dimension where your attacks exist. The demonstration convinced even the most warlike species that traditional approaches to conflict were obsolete. When beings could manipulate reality from higher dimensional layers, the largest fleets and most powerful weapons were as useless as stone knives against starships. Over the following months, the structures of galactic civilization underwent the most radical transformation in history. The Dimensional Exploration Collective was established, with humanity providing the technology and training needed for other species to begin accessing higher layers of reality. The Draconians discovered that their natural aggression could be channeled into exploration of dimension layers where survival required constant battle against forces of entropy and chaos. The Nexari found mathematical realms where their crystalline intelligence could interface directly with the geometric foundations of existence itself. The ethereals learned to navigate dimensions where energy and consciousness were indistinguishable. Even the mysterious Shadow Collective emerged from their hiding places to join the exploration efforts, their skills at moving unseen proving valuable in dimensions where stealth meant becoming one with the darkness between thoughts. A year after Captain Vasquez's revelation, Ambassador Sarah Chen stood before the reformed Galactic Council in her new role as Director of Interdimensional Relations. The chamber was filled with representatives who bore little resemblance to the proud, territorial beings who had laughed at humanity's exploration requests such a short time ago. "We stand at the beginning of true galactic civilization," she announced to delegates whose eyes now held the wonder of beings who had glimpsed infinity itself. "We have learned that existence is not a competition for limited resources, but a cooperation in exploring unlimited possibility." The transformation was visible in every representative present. Species that had spent millennia focused on conquest and expansion were now working together to understand. Civilizations that communicated through architectural, music, and beings that existed as living mathematics. Humanity never sought to conquer space, Chen continued, her voice carrying to listening posts across the galaxy, where millions of beings from hundreds of species were learning to navigate realms beyond their wildest dreams.